speaker is Erris Dunston. Today, Erris will be completing Level 1 in the Pathways Innovation and Planning curriculum. This project is researching and presenting. The project requires a speaker to research a topic and present the findings in a speech. Erris's speech is titled, What It Means to Be a Survivor. The speech is 5 to 7 minutes. Please help me welcome Erris to the lectern.
Good morning, Toastmasters.
Good morning.
The title of my speech is a question. What does it mean to be a survivor? In previous speeches, you may have heard me allude to the fact that I am a survivor and what that survivorship really means and looks like. In America today, there are over 331 million people that live in America today. 16 million of those people are cancer survivors of some kind. 374,000 of those are childhood cancer survivors that were diagnosed between 1970 and 1999. That's a startling statistic when you think about it, because that alludes to the fact that probably one in probably every 20 people have been impacted by this disease. That's a big number when you think about how we have all been affected by such a widespread disease. I'm going to tailor that down a little bit. In 1980, when I was diagnosed, I was 6 years old. And at that time, I thought I was privileged to be in a class of 36 other kids that were in a ward at UNC Chapel Hill that was one of the very few places in the state that treated children. But within 3 years, I was the only one alive. And I used to ask my grandmother, why me? Because I'm dealing with all these treatments, I'm dealing with the limited ability to go to school, I want to be like everybody else. So I was about 8 years old at the time. She sat me down as she would so often do, and had what I called a woman-to-woman conversation with an 8-year-old. And she says, let me help you understand. She says, don't you ever let me hear you say why you. She said, why not you? You're not special. She says, you're not anything different than anyone else. She said, you're a survivor. That's what you are. And you have an obligation to tell the story. And you're obligated to all the other kids that were like you that didn't make it. And I said, but Grandma, I want to be like everybody else. I just want to forget this and be like everybody else. She says, wait. She says, you'll never be like everybody else. She said, but it doesn't mean you can't overcome what you've gone through. I said, but I have all these scars. I have all these evidence of what I've been through. She says, it's not about the scars. She says, the scars are only reminders of what you have allowed yourself to overcome. And from that point on, I took a different look at what I was dealing with. So probably around the age of 12, I entered into a study group. And I was at my annual checkup, and they came around and said, we want you to be a part of study group. And I was like, yeah, this is neat. I'm going to do something, be a part of something. I said, maybe this is a new club I can be a member of. And as being a part of that study group, so at this point, I've probably been a part of that study group for 30 years, believe it or not. And that study group has studied kids from that point to now. And I noticed the older I got, the fewer people were in the group. And we don't actually meet as a group, but we get the results of the findings from different tests that we take over the course of that year. So every year I enter in my data, and then they assign me to different tests to test the results and the lasting, what they call the lasting results of that treatment. And many of the people that entered that treatment were faced with lasting impacts of either reoccurrences, muscular damage. Many of them have passed on. Most of the women are infertile. Those types of impacts are lasting for years to come. So if I reach this year in this cohort, this year makes me 40 years. So I'm a very, very rarity in this group now. However, I take it very seriously to participate in this data collection opportunity because I'm giving back to the research to tell the story of what those treatments have done to people and how they've helped them. Some people, their lives have been greatly rewarded like mine. I have very few lasting impacts. I have restricted airways because of mass radiation. I have tissue burns from extended chemo. I have some scar tissues from different surgeries, but for the most part, I function pretty well. I have, back then, they gave you this was one of the first times they did the balloon surgeries, where they would add balloons to different parts, and my cancer was surrounding my lungs, so they put a balloon around it. Well, the balloon went bad in about 5 years. However, they left the balloon and they left the damaged lung, but I've learned to function around it. And so I take it as an obligation every day to make sure that I give back to the research to help other people. That, to me, is what it means to be a survivor. It doesn't mean I get to wear a pretty ribbon and participate in a survivor's walk, to be on a poster, or to be a part of an interview. Those are great things, but I feel like there's an obligation that I have to give back to the science and to be a part of telling the story. Thank you, Toastmasters.